Wow, wow. Christopher Bond. Welcome to the book show, the one student, one book, one author mantra, the Global Reader Circle, the ultimate podcast that is designed to have you inspire and motivate a lifelong learner and committed reader out of every global person. On behalf of our global community, we are very humbled to have Christopher Bond on the spotlight. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Smart Steward. It's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Christopher Bond, we'd like you to tell us about Christopher Bond. Who is Christopher Bond? Tell us about you.
Sure. Yeah. I'm an American author. I was born and raised in Ohio, but I now live pretty close to Denver, Colorado, in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains. Um, I write dark fiction mostly, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of science fiction, but mostly known for my horror stories. I've been
Wow.
writing for a few years, and my debut novel just came out in January. But I do have quite a few other stories out there that are available.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Well, we like you to tell us about your reading lifestyle. When do you think you became an intentional reader? When was that time you would turn off the TV and make sure the book had all your time?
Oh, wow. Very young, very young. I'd have to say maybe around six or seven. I was lucky. I was fortunate enough that I grew up in a house full of books, and my mother and my father were both avid readers, so I always had a lot of
Wow.
material around. But I would say probably around maybe second grade is when I really started to seek out books that really appealed to me rather than books that were suggested for me. So, but I used to just rip through books. We used to go to the library all the time, get a huge stack of them and bring them home. And I grew up in the 80s and the 90s when I was a kid, and we did have TV, but we didn't have cable. Mostly what we watched on TV was whatever VHS tapes we had lying around for the VCR. So I would say a good amount of my free time was spent reading. Definitely.
Wow. Wow. So I like you to talk about the book or the author that made it easy for you to stay a lifelong learner. What were you exploring? What
Oh,
kept your eye glued on the book? Yeah.
well, that's a very good question. I think there were definitely a lot of influences, but I will say probably C.S. Lewis with the Chronicles of Narnia. I
Mm,
started those when I was very young, and I think that kind of opened up my mind a little bit to what was out there before. It was, when you're in kindergarten or when you're very young, the books you read are simple, very simple plots, very
yeah.
simple storylines. But when I got a hold of the Witch, and the Wardrobe, it just really expanded my mind. There was something there. There was some kind of magic there, and it got a hold of me. So once I started reading books along that line, I couldn't get enough.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Well, I like you to share with us. What would you say is the significance of reading for you? And what would you say would have happened to Christopher Bond if you were not born into this home where reading was the order of the day?
Well, that yeah. So wow. So the meaning of reading for me has evolved over the years and grown with me. It's changed. It's changed as I've changed. I
Yeah,
think when I was younger, reading was a good way to transport me to some other place. It was a way for me to, um, you know, uh, find a place to where I could visit in my mind. It was
yeah,
find a place to really unlock my imagination. And
yeah,
as I've grown older, it's almost no matter what you're going through in life, you can always find a book, a character, an author. You can always find something in those pages that resonates with you. So whether you're going through a good time or a bad time, or you just want to be entertained. It doesn't have to be serious, or you want to learn something. It's you do all that within the pages of the books you read. So um, for me, it's always been a comfort. It's always been a comfort zone, a comfort place for me, a place of solitude where I can get a little time alone and just focusing on with the book. It's very calming. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a good way. It's a good way to deal with stress. Life can be really
So
stressful. It's a
so
very good way to kind of lose
so
yourself.
so you can imagine your life. What would you imagine your life to look like if you were not this lifelong learner? Obviously, over the period of time, your reading culture has evolved, and it seems you are no longer the person you used to be. So, what would you say would have happened to Christopher Bond if he was not a lifelong learner?
Well, I think well, where I grew up was a very rural area. There weren't a lot of people. Small town, small population. Not a lot of access to different cultures or ideas or people. Not that it was closed
Yeah,
minded, but it was just a simple area. And the first thing that reading kind of opened my eyes to was the experience dealing with other people that weren't like me, other cultures, other
yeah,
places, other food, other music, other ideas that weren't exactly
yeah.
being taught to me by my parents. And I think that without that, I think I would be a very different person. I think not necessarily closed-minded, but just maybe a little bit more ignorant of um, of the way the world
and,
of the way the world
and,
works.
the,
So
and the cause of ignorance will be so cumbersome and massive. Well, thank you for being a lifelong learner, Christopher Bond.
yes, absolutely.
Wow, amazing. Wow, on the occasion of one book, one student, one author mantra, we are having Christopher Bond on the show. And if you're missing this one, well, you're really missing a lot. So if you're streaming this, don't forget you have an opportunity to share so that your friends can get to meet Christopher Bond on the show. Christopher Bond, let's talk
Yes,
about
sir.
your journey into authorhood. Let's talk about your journey into authorhood. When did you start writing and when did you have your first publications? As a matter of fact, what kind of writer would you say you are and what kind of problems are you trying to solve?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I'll start with the first part of that. Like I said, I've been a lifelong reader, and I've always entertained the idea of writing. It always seemed like it would be a good thing to do, a cool thing to do. But I think I had to reach a certain place in my life to actualize that dream in my head, to get to a place where I felt like I was ready to take a stab at it. So back during 2020, during the pandemic, I found myself um, without a job. Everybody was told not to go to work for a couple months where I was at, and so
Yeah.
found a lot of free time on my hands. And with the encouragement of my wife Emily, um, I just went for it. I just started getting stories out of my head and putting them on paper. And I'll tell you, those first 5 or 6 or 7 stories were very, very rough. It took a lot of practice to find my voice and to get a little confidence. I had the ideas, I just didn't know how to put them onto paper. So now I've been writing for about 4 years. Um, I think my first publication came about 6 months after I started writing. I got a short story in an anthology through Hydra
Oh,
Press, and that was a fantasy story. And that signing that first contract for the first story, receiving a payment, that's such a good ego boost and such a good motivator for a first time writer.
yeah,
So um, once I
yeah.
got to sign that contract, and it was full steam ahead. I've just been writing ever since. So now I've written dozens of stories. I've written 4 books as of now. I'm working on my fifth, but I've only had one published as of yet. So I do have a couple other things in the works that I can't quite talk about yet because the ink's not dry on the contracts. But hopefully I'll have some good news to share within the next couple weeks.
Wow, amazing, amazing. So let's talk about your solo book. Let's talk about your solo book. What's the
Sure.
title and what who are your target audience? and what problems are you trying to solve with that one right?
I gotcha. Well, I'll start with the last part first. When I sit down to write, my first goal is to entertain myself. Um, one of the
Wow.
most popular pieces of advice that yeah, one of the most popular pieces of advice that I hear with beginning writers is that write the book that you want to read. So the
Yeah,
very first thing I want to do is I have to be excited about the idea, and then I just want to entertain myself, and then after that comes wanting to entertain an audience, right? So I don't
yeah,
you typically start off with a broad theme or a really deep meaning, other than wanting to entertain myself and the people who will hopefully read it. Um, but
mm,
with this, my debut book is The Devil Came Down the Mountain. That was published in January through a press called Horrorsmith Publishing, and it follows four friends who go on a camping trip to the Uinta Mountains in Utah, um, because they want to go search for a place called the Murmuring Caves, where
wow,
in the 1800s, it was the site of the Yangwang massacre, where over 100 Chinese transcontinental railroad workers disappeared. So there's
yeah,
some history there, some history in the hills, and they want to go
mm,
explore. So um, unfortunately for them, they do make it to the caves, and
wow,
things do not turn out the way they hoped they would.
wow, wow, wow,
So
amazing. So how
yeah, I
many
guess the book,
pages, how many pages is the book, and how do we get to find the book?
right. The book is just shy of 200 pages. It's about 196 pages. It is available via Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and also directly through Horrorsmith Publishing.
The mountain came down.
Uh,
Wow.
the The Devil Came Down the Mountain.
The devil came down the mountain. The devil came down the mountain. Wow. Christopher
That's right.
Bond. That's an amazing title. And
Oh,
I
thank
feel if you're streaming this, you can't afford to miss this one. You can't afford to miss this one. The devil came down the mountain. Ah. So what was your inspiration, Christopher Bond? What was your inspiration? It seems with the title, it seems that you have a whole lot of information you're trying to relate to your audience from the book cover and the title.
Oh yeah. Well, the inspiration for The Devil Came Down the Mountain came to me in a few different ways. A lot of times when I start a horror story, I try to think of what scares me, and a couple of the things that scare me are claustrophobia, um, being engulfed,
Oh,
being engulfed in darkness,
oh.
not be.
Uh, so
So
this is about you. This is your story. Wow.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
amazing,
I
amazing.
think you have to put a piece of yourself. You have to put a piece of yourself in everything you write. You know, it makes it
Yeah.
more real.
Wow. Yeah. You are your
uh,
own protagonist.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a piece of me in each one of the characters, I'm sure. And and the other part that inspired me for this story is I was watching a documentary about the creation of the American West back when it was a wild place. And I was watching a
Yeah,
documentary, and they were talking about the first railroad, the Transcontinental Railroad that linked the east and west coast of America. And
yeah,
during the construction of that, there were anywhere from 15 to 20,000 Chinese immigrants that worked on this railroad, and 1,200 to 2,000 of them died creating the railroad. It was a very dangerous job, and a lot of them were just all grouped together and sent back to China in boxes for the families to sort out. They really weren't respected as workers, and that's where the other half of this came from. The story of the Yangwang massacre was not a real story, but it was inspired by how frivolous their lives were treated during the creation of the railroad. So that's the other half of it.
wow.
It's not quite historical fiction, but it is based on some historical events.
Wow. Wow. Christopher Bond. Well, we are very happy that you did a thing, and we are celebrating this great achievement with you. Now, how does it
Well,
feel
thank
now that you're an author? How does it feel being that you have a whole lot of people from all over the world? How do you manage your fan base? What's your strategy to reach out to your readers?
Well, I have the strategy is try to put myself out there as much as possible and not make a fool out of myself, right? Um, try
Yeah.
not to put my foot in my mouth and say something stupid, but it's been very organic. It's been very organic. Word of mouth, making
Yeah.
friends within the indie horror community, and I'm not wouldn't go so far as to say networking because I'm not a networker, but it's that I've found that the indie horror community is very welcoming and open, and they it's a community that's very passionate about the literature and about the subject matter, and it's been really nice as far as being an author. It still feels brand new every time I sit down to write a story. There's a moment where I think, what the heck am I doing? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I know where I'm going with this? You still
Yeah.
get that little bit of hesitation at the start of every project, or even when you're just talking about your books, where you almost get like they call it imposter syndrome, where you're like, wait, is this am I an author? Am I allowed to talk about books? Am I an author? Am I allowed to do this? But you push past that, and
Yeah.
you just try to get yourself out there any way you can.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Well, don't forget to stream this session, and don't forget to share with your friends. We've been on to amazing author Christopher Bond, the author of The Devil Came Down from the Mountain. Wow, Christopher Bond, I'd like you to tell us again, how do we get to find your book? Are you a social media person? How do we get to build a rapport with you?
Oh yes, I am on social media. I'm on Twitter at Cbond Writes, CBOND Writes. I'm also on Facebook. I don't really have uh, a cool address for that. You just got to look up Christopher Bond author, I guess. But I also have a website, ChristopherBondAuthor.com. Um, and the book, The Devil Came Down the Mountain, it is available via Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, and as well as Horrorsmith Publishing's website.
Amazing. Well, Christopher Bond, we get to the part of the show where you will be naming 10 books, 10 authors that really inspired you to stay a lifelong learner, 10 authors that you would love to reread their books, 10 books that you would love to recommend, 10 books that really stayed with you. I'm sure you would be willing to take this challenge.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I mean, it's not an easy challenge. I think it changes every day, but I do have a top 10 for you.
Wow. Well, if you're streaming
Are you
this,
ready?
we've been on to Christopher Bond. Christopher Bond will pass for a room full of books. And we are at that point in the show where Christopher Bond will be naming 10 amazing books that made an amazing significance for him. Well, like I said, you can't afford to miss this episode. And make sure you do tell your friends about the author of The Devil Came Down the Mountain, Christopher Bond. Wow, Christopher Bond, I'm sure you're ready. You're ready to take the challenge.
Oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, Smart Steward. All right. So I did pick 10
Well,
books,
well, well,
and
well,
to pay
well, well,
homage.
well.
Well,
Can
all
you
right.
take it slow?
You want me to take it slow?
Yeah. We'll be
You
counting it on
ready?
you. Okay,
Okay.
let's go.
Okay. All right. All right. Here we go. So the first one is The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis. It's part of the Chronicles of Narnia, which is the series, like I mentioned, that inspired me when I was very young to be a lifelong learner. So, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis.
Wow.
Second book is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. Also a children's book, also one that deals heavily with fantasy and stretched my little mind when I was young and showed me some possibilities. So, A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. All right, now we get into the grown-up stuff. Let's see here. We got Dune by Frank Herbert, the classic sci-fi novel. That one always sticks with me. That's a reread every year or two. Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This was required reading when I was in high school, and I became a lover of all of his fiction, but I always go back to this one because it's what started my love with his style of prose. So, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck.
Wow.
Next up is Coco by Peter Straub. Peter Straub was a horror author, but he was very his prose was very dense, very lyrical. He showed me that horror fiction doesn't have to be just about blood and guts. It can be about stuff that happens in your mind. And I love that. I love everything he wrote. Peter Straub, Coco. Next up is The Road.
Christopher Bond. The Road with 6. The Road will be number 6. Amazing. You guys.
All right.
Go on.
All right. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Number 7 will be A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, who is my favorite science fiction author. He wrote a lot of famous books that became movies, and he's incredible. Number 7. So number 8 is The Starless Sea by Aaron Morgenstern. This is a more modern book, a fantasy novel, and it's all about the love of story. And I can't get enough of it. I've read it 3 times already. All right, number 9. The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. The incredible Hannibal Lecter character. Dark, fast-paced, thrilling, and pretty damn scary. All right. And last but not least, number 10 is It by Stephen King. I had a hard time picking. Yeah, I had a hard time picking one, but I always go back to It.
Christopher Bond. Wow.
I did it.
So amazing. You are very amazing. You are very awesome. I like to ask you for our audience who is streaming this globally. I like you share with us. Do you remember any event or occurrence that an idea or knowledge that you read from a book had helped you solve a problem or probably change your mind? Do you remember?
Oh, wow.
Like that?
Okay, that's a very good question. Give me a second here. When did a book help me solve a problem? Well, when I was younger, I was fascinated with books about independent, stubborn children, like The Boxcar Children, My Side of the Mountain, Hatchet. All these books about children being able to go off on their own and survive on their own without their parents, which is just always fascinated me when I was very young. And I think I learned a lot from that growing up. I became independent. I became confident to go out on my own, to try new things, to have new experiences far from home that were out of my daily wheelhouse. And I think it caused me when I was 21 to move 6,000 miles away and move to Hawaii, to a place where I didn't know anybody.
Wow.
And I eventually met my wife there. So I gotta say that helped me solve a problem.
Wow. Wow, that is fun. Wow, wonderful, amazing. So, in your streaming days, we've been on Christopher Bond. Christopher is the author of The Devil Came Down the Mountain. Well, like I said, you can't afford to miss this episode, and you would be required to share this episode with your friends because Christopher Bond will pass for a room full of books, and you can't afford to miss this ride. Wow, Christopher Bond, it's been so awesome having you on our spotlight. But before you go, I'd like you to tell us what will be your last words to our readers globally, to someone who is yet to read a book, to someone who has not been able to buy a book, to someone who has books and cannot or would not want to read them. What would be your advice?
Well, I think in my advice to people who don't read or don't have access to reading material would be the same advice I would give somebody who's just struggling in their day to day life, and that's keep an open mind and be positive. And there's a lot of things out in the world that may seem scary or may seem like you might not enjoy them, but you're not going to know until you try. So, um, and if you
Yeah.
and if you don't have access to books, I feel I hope that you find a way to get to them.
Well, that is why the Guardian Cross podcast is building a community to bring people like you closer to people like that who do not have access to book. And not just that, our community promises to inspire and motivate you to stay a lifelong learner. Well, with this, we come to the end of this session. And we hope that we'll be seeing Christopher Bond on our Zoom meet and greet, on our webinars. And I'm sure, Christopher Bond, you are open for mentorship and coaching.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you so much, Smart Steward, for having me on the Godian podcast. And I'm so thankful for being here and so happy we got to talk about books today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We appreciate. Wow, with this, we come to the end of this unique episode. Well, we had Christopher Bond on our spotlight. And just like we say, that you become the books you read and the people you meet. Christopher Bond is a tall figure you can't afford to miss. So trust me, this will be an awesome devouring for you. Thank you very much, Christopher Bond, for making it to our spotlight on behalf of our global community. It has been your host, Smart Steward Odor. Christopher Bond, thank you very much.
Thank,
Thank you. I
thank,
do appreciate you for your time.
thank you very much.